About a couple weeks ago, I was in a Bible study, and we were talking about everything we do should be for God. And so I talked to Pastor Larry when I met with him, and I said, I get it in my personal life, but I don't see it in my job. You know, I mean, I think I'm doing the right thing, but I don't find moments to thank God or to everything I do is for God. So this week, he said, pray about it if you find, because I was coming up for a very large trial, biggest in my career, and I said, I just don't see how God is going to be there this week. You know, I don't find the court to be much about justice. And he said, well, if you find a way to glorify God this week, then you're going to be at peace. And so I prayed at the beginning of the week, and I said, God, give me moments to glorify you. Give me moments to give you praise, because I don't see them, okay? These two have been fighting for years, and we're going to a very contested lawsuit. And so we went to trial, and the judge said, I want you to go down and try to, one last attempt for settling. And I said, this will be quick, okay? And we walked in, and sure enough, 2 hours of negotiation, we were no closer together. We were actually farther apart. And there was no hope. And we walked out, and I told my clients, this is probably it, we're going to trial. And I looked at them and I said, I know you believe in God, now it's time to pray. And so we prayed, and we sat there and just prayed and said, God, if there's going to be a settlement, it's going to be you, because we haven't moved. And we finished praying, and the settling judge said, come on in. I thought, oh, it's over. We walked in, and she said, we're about $10,000 apart, and we were over $100,000 apart. And we settled it right then and there. And I walked out of there, and I told my clients, I said, you know, it's only the grace of God we settled. And I said, it's time to thank him now. So we said another prayer, and we said thanks.
Great. Amen. Thank you, Lynette. Appreciate that. Another approach she could have taken is said, I did it. I was the one, I did it, I negotiated that thing. But to God be the glory, and you did it. And God was in the midst of all of that, and that's so beautiful. So think about in your week where God intervenes. God does something in your life that's really neat, and because he's waiting to do that sort of thing. Now, we're going to talk about consequences today. But before we do, I want to say some things about Saul. We've been following this television show, AD, on Sunday nights at 9, and I've been wholeheartedly endorsing that program, and I still do. I really like it, and I'm looking forward to tonight. I'm really looking forward to tonight. Warriors at 5 o'clock, and 9 o'clock being AD, I'm going to be glued to the television tonight, so don't call me unless you have an emergency. You understand? No emergencies tonight, not to interrupt the Warriors or AD. But last week, oh my word, I don't know what happened, why they did what they did, but they portrayed Saul as being this big troublemaker for the church, to the point where everybody wanted him out and escorted him out of the city. So the episode concludes with them sending him off to the hinterlands to preach. I'm like, where did they get that? And I'd have to say, okay, maybe their imagination. Okay, now, if I wrote a book, and it was like a book about my life, all right? And they made it a movie, okay? So it'd be a comedy. And the writer for the script goes and takes liberties and, you know, makes me, you know, maybe win an Olympic gold medal or something like that, you know? That would be one thing, okay? But when you're dealing with something from the Bible, why don't you just stick with what's in the Bible, okay? Because I mean, it's kind of scary stuff if you mess this up. So a passage that I had Jill read this morning from Galatians. He writes this: I did not consult with any man. This is in his conversion. Nor did I go up to Jerusalem to see those who were apostles before I was. But I went immediately into Arabia and later returned to Damascus. Then, after 3 years, right? I went up to Jerusalem to get acquainted with Peter and stayed with him 15 days. 15 days. In verse 21, we read, I was personally unknown to the churches of Judea that are in Christ. They only heard the report. The man who formerly persecuted us is now preaching the faith he once tried to destroy. And then it concludes this passage, and they praised God because of me. Okay, now, does that sound like someone who's escorted out of Jerusalem for preaching a radical Christianity like we saw last Sunday night? No, they got it wrong. Okay, so they're human. AD is still a good series. I still highly recommend it and watch it. But remember, it is not the Bible. So that's why you come to church and we look at the Bible. And we try to set this thing straight. I also want to dispel a misunderstanding about his name, Saul. I hear this frequently about Saul. So you know that when he wrote all these letters in the Bible, his name was Paul, right? So it's assumed that his name was Saul until he became a Christian. Then he got this Christian name, Paul. No. It wasn't until much later when Saul was witnessing amongst the Gentiles that he refers to himself by his Latin name. So he was born Saul of the tribe of Benjamin. From the tribe of Benjamin was somebody called King Saul. Remember King Saul, the first king of Israel? So it was a common name there. He was also born in Tarsus. So he was a Roman citizen because he was born there. And the Latin name that they gave him, in addition to his Hebrew name, was Paul. So he was born with both of those names. And Saul was the name that Jesus referred to him when they met him on the road to Damascus. Why? Because Jesus spoke Hebrew. Later, when he was preaching into Gentile areas where God sent him to ultimately, it made more sense to use the Latin name, all right, Paul. It would be like if my name was Joseph and I was working among Spanish-speaking Hispanics, I would relate better to the people I was trying to reach if I was Jose than Joseph. There's not much you can do with the name Larry. So enough on Saul Paul for now, just to dispel that whole thing of where the name came from. It's almost as if God, oh no, it's exactly, God was preparing this very Hebrew of Hebrews to preach to Gentiles, even by giving him two names, Saul and Paul. Now, let's talk about consequences. While watching last Sunday night's episode, I was struck by how a few things that a few people did had consequences for a lot of people. And it got me to thinking that there are always consequences to our actions. We probably don't often realize how one action or one statement on our part can have this huge impact, either negative or positive, on someone else. It's huge. You, sitting right there, have a huge amount of influence by what you say and what you do. So you have to bear with me just a little bit of history. There's a new emperor of Rome in the show called Caligula. Can you say Caligula? Now, if his name was Roger Smith, would it be easier to remember? Caligula. Say it again. Okay. He's portrayed as this pompous little, I can't say it because I'm standing up here in front of church, but he's very obnoxious. And history has it that he was really into worshiping himself. He saw himself kind of as a god. And whenever I see him in this show, it's something about Caligula that just kind of stirs me up. I just don't like the guy. And I got to welcome him into church if he comes into church, but I don't think he's going to come into church, But we might describe him today as kind of narcissistic, okay? I have to say a lot of pastors are narcissistic. See, we're more into promoting ourselves than to anyone else. Let me give you an example. Who are you all looking at right now? And how many feet higher am I than you? And see, that sort of goes to our head. Yeah, and the more crowded the place gets, the bigger the head gets, and the more narcissistic we can tend to get. So Emperor Caligula is very young. He's been given all of Rome. Actually, he hasn't been given all of Rome. He kind of took it through some deception, as they showed in AD, and history backs that up. His head is way too big for himself now. And gets this idea in his head. What we're going to do is I'm going to have statues made of myself. And I'm going to put it right there in the center of a Jewish worship, okay? And every time they come in to worship God, they're going to worship the real God, Caligula. Oh, yeah, okay. It's a little extreme, a little more extreme for pastors, but I've seen pastors do some pretty crazy things to have self-worship kind of thing. But putting a Roman Gentile statue right there in a Jewish holy temple, did you know that that was considered an end times prophecy mentioned in the Old Testament book of Daniel? They even mentioned it last week in AD, but you may have missed it. Jesus mentioned it in Matthew 24:15, where he said, "So when you see standing in the holy place," that's the temple, "the abomination that causes desolation," that's what was mentioned last week in AD, "spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand," Jesus said. "Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." This abomination that causes desolation was understood to be when a foreign god, this is a prophecy that Jesus understood, Daniel made it, God gave it to him. When a foreign god was placed inside the temple, that would lead to the removal of God's presence. It was a prophecy that all Jews really dreaded and hoped that they didn't have to see in their day. Emperor Caligula, on the other hand, he had no awareness of this. He didn't care, not at all. He simply wanted to be worshipped. He didn't care what the consequences were of them worshiping him. He just wanted it. He's not a believer in God, had no respect for the Jews. He had no respect for the Christians. No. Putting a statue in the center of worship had a consequence. Remember, all actions have consequences, small ones and big ones. So this is a consequence I saw last week in the show. It caused the Jewish high priest Caiaphas to do what he could, oh, this was neat, to unite all the Jews together. Hey, why would that be good? Because remember, the Jews were trying to kill the Christians, the Christian Jews. So now he's uniting them all together into one group to stand up against the Romans. Oh, so there was a good consequence, all right? But Caligula's threat of putting a statue of himself in the Jewish temple had a negative consequence for Christians. That put the guy under him, Pontius Pilate, to clamp down on any kind of uprising that was going on. So we see in the movie a young gal, a seamstress. She comes to Jesus and she's all excited. Wow, she wants to follow Jesus, wants to get baptized. She's telling her Christian sisters, and it's overheard. And the wife of Pontius Pilate hears it, takes that information to her husband, who then escorts the young gal to the courtyard and makes a spectacle of her by having her flogged. You know what flogging is? It's taking this nasty whip right in front of everybody and just tearing her to pieces. Negative consequence of Caligula's little selfish act of putting the temple and the statue of the temple. All right. So here is a young seamstress, follower of Christ, gets flogged or whipped because a young narcissistic Roman ruler had no respect for anyone or anything besides himself. In his mind, he's God. But the problem with a human playing God, you know what that problem is. You can wake up now, history lesson's over. The problem with playing God, we're short-sighted. Also, we're into ourselves. We're really into ourselves. And so we're going to look out for what's best for us. We don't respect or look out for the welfare of others. And that's the source of most of our problems. No one is looking out for anyone else. We're looking out for ourselves. A week ago Friday, a white police officer in McKinney, Texas. You know where McKinney, Texas is? It's a suburb of Dallas. I've been there many times. A week ago Friday, a white police officer pulled a gun on a group of African-American teenagers in attempting to break up what had become a mess, kind of a fight. In the process, he pinned a bikini-clad girl to the ground, and the pictures were taken. It went viral, and you know how the whole thing is. Another example of a bad cop behavior. Hundreds took to the streets of McKinney after that in protest of police brutality. This cop has had numerous hate and death threats to himself and to his family. I was intrigued by the story about how this whole thing had come about. What had led to this cop doing what he did? What he did was wrong. It was definitely wrong. He admits it was wrong, and he shouldn't have done it. Nobody was killed, but he did the wrong thing. He admits that his emotions got the better of him. So I wondered, what events led to this cop doing what he did, this stupid act that he did? So I did some reading on it, and I found out that what his lawyer is saying is that his shift started at 6 o'clock that night. His first call was to a poolside at an apartment where a father had pulled a trigger on his own head and shot his brains out in front of his wife and children and whoever else was at the pool. He was the cop who had to take pictures at the scene. He was the cop who had to sit with the wife and her children and console them until others got there. His second call was to a teenage girl who was attempting a suicide at her house. He talked her down from jumping off the roof and consoled her and probably saved a life. That was his first two calls that night. Then he gets this third call. And the dispatcher, hearing what he had done already, and his superiors were saying, no, don't take this third call. No, don't go take this third call. You're emotionally distressed at this point. At that point, he should have what? Taken a break. He probably should have taken the rest of the night off. He has seen enough for one night. But no, he decides that no, he can do this. I can go and do this. So he gets to this gated housing community, very nice community with a pool and all that sort of thing, where this fight was going on. So how did this fight start? The fight started when a white woman started yelling at some African American girls who were having a party, a pool party at this complex, telling them to go back to their Section 8 housing, even though most of them lived in that affluent housing development and belonged there, okay? So, now, consequences. That woman rudely running her mouth out of line cost a 10-year veteran of the McKinney Police Force his job. It cost him the security of his family, and probably probably cost him his home. Who knows how much he owed on it. Related to that episode will probably be health issues, mental if not physical, for his immediate family and his extended family who are stressed over this whole thing. Not to mention the girls who had to be a part of all that, who were having a party. All because one person ran the mouth, caused all of this. And it goes deeper and deeper. I've heard rumors that the woman running the mouth worked for Bank of America, and she's been put on leave now. A fourth grade teacher in McKinney ran the mouth on Facebook and against African Americans, and she's gotten suspended from her teaching job. It just goes on and on and on. As most of you know, I ride the bus from San Jose to Fremont, and I have been considering buying another car, but haven't thought much about it. So I'll be riding the bus for a while. And I have some experiences on there. I have to depend upon the mercy of the bus drivers at times, because the bus is really full, and to get myself and my bike on a bus can sometimes depend upon the driver being very nice to me. And I have found that all of the VTA drivers I've ridden with have been very nice, very helpful, very much appreciate their help. But there's one driver in particular who drives the night run from Fremont to San Jose and back, he is just so excited to see every passenger get on his bus. And when I'm riding here, coming from here after a meeting, and all I want to do is get home, I don't want any kind of hassle. When that door opens up and he welcomes me in there, I just am so happy. It just makes my night because of his attitude. I like that. And what it does, what's been interesting, is to watch his attitude to all those getting on the bus seems to have an impact on those on the bus. It's kind of a happier ride. It's really, really neat. See, our actions always have consequences, always. And we have to understand why we do what we do, and how someone's bad day or bad year doesn't have to ruin our day. Are you with me there? It's our choice how we respond. Our choice. Not theirs, our choice. That Texas police officer didn't have to respond to that call to break up the fight at the party that night. He could have and should have passed on it. He was emotionally exhausted. But I can imagine him, he was probably feeling invincible, you know? Like, I've already saved one girl's life. I've already helped a family. Man, I can do anything now. I can go out and do there, instead of stopping and saying, how do I feel? How do I feel about this? Man, I am shook. I am really shook. You know, it's what we have to do is, you know, what he may have seen that night, he may have seen talking this girl down, that she had been bullied. And maybe that really had irked him. And so when he got there to that pool party and he saw that that some of these girls were bullying some others or whatever and running the mouth and whatnot, it just irked him. He needed to step back, recognize his weakness, and know that he is not God and can't fix everything. So ask yourself how you're feeling today. Okay? Take a deep breath. Right now, just do that. Take a deep breath. Wake up. Now, ask yourself this question. How am I feeling today? Fine. Where is Jesus in your life? See, out of your feelings will come actions. Out of your actions will come consequences. Your actions are going to influence someone else, and you may not even know them. Now think about this. Who would you rather have driving that car behind you? Someone having a bad day or somebody having a good day? So let's see what we can do to help someone have a good day. So try identifying how you feel today. So how do you feel today? Fine. No, go a little deeper. Use the words like sad, worried, blah. I'll feel better when I'm out of here not listening to you. Mad. Let's say someone cuts you off on 880, hits the brakes, and then gives you the finger for insinuating that you're a lousy driver holding up traffic and that you really should give up your driver's license, go live in a nursing home. Okay, maybe I'm reading more into it than because of my bald head, but that episode may make you feel frustrated. It may make you feel insulted. It may make you feel marginalized. Identify it. How am I feeling today? But then, what are you going to do with those feelings now that you've identified them and their cause? You're going to replace them with a blessing so that you can be a blessing to someone else. Psalm 118 says this, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever." Let Israel say, his love endures. Let the house of Aaron say, his love endures. Let those who fear the Lord say, his love endures forever. We need to determine today that we're going to be a blessing to at least one person other than ourselves. I don't feel like being a blessing to anybody else. You hear me? I am mad. That person cut me off and I'm mad. I got ripped off. I am mad. I have problems. I'm mad. You understand that? I am mad. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. Let those who fear the Lord say, his love endures forever. All right? Take a deep breath and say those words. Just say those words. Be in touch with how you're feeling. And you know, Be a blessing to someone today, somewhere. And we can do that if Jesus is alive within us. If Jesus is alive within us, take a deep breath and recite those words over and over and over. And if you can't say those words, then at least keep your mouth shut, and then you will at least not be a hindrance to anybody else. Amen?